My name is Claire. I live in a small blue house on Maple Street in New York, America. The porch leans a little, the door sticks in summer, and the mailbox rattles when the wind turns the corner. Inside, the floors creak like old friends. On the kitchen shelf, I keep 3 mugs, a jar of sugar, and a folded list of numbers that I read when the house is quiet. My son, Rory, sleeps in a white crib by the window. He is 6 months old and warm as fresh bread. Every night I stand over him and think of what I must do next and how I must do it softly. Dad's holiday party was in Boston, in his red brick townhouse with the glossy steps. He is Richard to everyone else, but he is Dad in my bones. The hall smelled like pine and good soap. The silver rang like a small bell each time a spoon touched a glass. People smiled with their teeth and spoke in light voices about hard things. My sister, Emily, had signed her divorce papers the week before, and everyone kept saying that she looked remarkably well, which is what people say when they have run out of better words. She wore a navy dress and held herself straight, but her hands wanted to shake. I arrived with Rory tucked in a red blanket. I kissed Dad's cheek. He patted my back and looked over my shoulder at the room, as if the room might change its mind and walk away. An old friend of his, a man named Thomas, told me a story about a deal in New York that brought in $48,000 for his firm, and he smiled in a way that asked me to admire him. I smiled back in a way that did not promise anything. A woman from Chicago, Maria, asked to hold the baby, and I let her. He smiled his soft, gummy smile, and 3 hearts broke a little with love. After dinner, Dad found me by the hallway mirror. His tie was straight, and his eyes were bright, the way a man's eyes get when he thinks he is managing a problem. "Claire," he said, and his voice turned kind, the way a voice does when it is asking for something. "Would you mind taking the baby home now? Emily needs some space to decompress." He used that word like a warm towel, decompress, like he was caring for her with the perfect tool. I felt the small weight of the room press against my ribs. I looked at my sister. She had a glass of water and a far look, like someone listening for a train. I said, "Okay," and I smiled and I left. The night outside was cold and clear. America knows how to shine in December. Wreaths in windows, a string of white lights over a narrow street, a taxi sighing to a stop. I strapped Rory into the car seat and drove past the river, past the old bridge, past a group of students who laughed like they were rich in time. I hummed to keep him calm. By the time I reached Maple Street, he was asleep. I carried him inside, laid him down, and stood in my kitchen with my hands on the counter until my breath came slow again. Then I boiled water and opened my list. On it were names and dates, small sums and large ones, $72, 000, $150,500, and once, from London in Europe, £38,000, and the note beside that line read vintage wine, which I did not believe. I had seen these numbers move in and out of accounts that sat under my family's roof, like quiet trunks in a cellar. I had asked a few soft questions in the fall and learned the tone of the answers. The tone said, "Hush. But I have a baby now. Hush is not a plan." I took my phone and sent one message to a group chat named Northwind. It had 3 people in it. Maria from New York, Hannah in Washington, and Priya, a solicitor in London who had once told me that truth is slow, but it arrives. I wrote only one word: go. They did not know, back at the party, what was going to happen to them. 7 hours later, when dawn would touch the brick on Dad's house, my note would arrive with 5 police air cars and 10 lawyers who do not blink at doors. But for now, I rinsed my mug, checked the lock, and listened to the blue house breathe around us. I kissed Rory's forehead and whispered, "Almost time, love." Then I turned off the light and waited. I did not sleep much that night. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you notice the small sounds, the hum of the fridge, the tick of the baseboard heat, the soft sigh my son makes when he turns in his crib. I sat at the kitchen table in my small blue house in New York, America, and spread out the papers I had kept hidden in a flour tin. I like simple things: a clean sheet, a straight list, a cup of tea that does not lie. Money should be simple too. Either it is yours, or it is not. Either it goes to the right place, or it does not. These papers did not feel simple. It started with Emily's divorce in Chicago. Her ex, Mark, is a man who smiles with his mouth and shows you his empty hands. In June, when she called me to say he was gone, I drove out and helped her box shoes and photos. I thought the worst thing we would face was the ache in her chest. But in a folder at the back of a drawer, I found a bank statement with a transfer marked consulting. $48,500 left a family account and went to a sunny shell with a name that sounded like a beach house. The next month there was another, $72,000. Then, tucked among those lines, a wire from London in Europe came in at £38,000 and a note said vintage wine. Emily does not drink wine that costs a month of rent. Dad does not either. He likes plain coffee and a good steak. The note felt like a joke I was not meant to get. I asked Dad, Richard, about it in August, in his red brick townhouse in Boston. We stood by the bay window, looking out at the street like two actors who had lost the script. He gave me that father smile, the one that says I am still the child here. Grown-up business, Claire, he said. Stop worrying. Emily needs to focus on healing. He said healing like it had a price tag. When I tried Oliver, his accountant, he laughed and told me the funds were strategically positioned, so Mark could not reach them. Strategically positioned felt like another way to say hidden. I went home and made my own plan. I called Maria in New York, a lawyer whose voice is calm even when the room shakes. I called Hannah in Washington, who once worked on fraud cases and knows how numbers lie. I sent a careful note to Priya in London, a solicitor who moves through facts like a neat knife. We did not make a storm. We made a map. From the Boston townhouse to a gray tower in New York that holds mail for many names. From there to a trust in Delaware that blinked in and out like a weak light. And back again to accounts that once carried Mom's name, still holding the last love we put there when she got sick. The map had people too. Thomas, Dad's old friend, said at a party that his firm had cleared $48,000 on a New York deal that came together with help from a friend. The timing matched the first strange transfer. An email from Oliver to Maria slipped through by mistake and said, "Let's park $150,500 for Q4 in a safe lane." A safe lane for whom? Not for Emily, who was counting bills for boxes and a new key. Not for Rory, whose college fund was meant to be a clean jar with his name on it. Not for me, standing in my house at midnight, making tea I forgot to drink. When I say I found something, I do not mean a clue from a movie. I mean that I wrote down a list of dates, and they made a straight line to a door that should not have been locked. I mean that £38,000 passed through Europe and came back to America to pretend it had a new face. I mean that consulting and vintage wine were veils tossed over the same pile. I mean that my father, who taught me to count change after the grocery, had learned to stack dollars where no one would look until it was too late. So I made it not too late. I formed the North Wind chat with Maria, Hannah, and Priya. We kept the language plain. We kept the steps clean. We set the time, the filings, the notices. We asked for a freeze so the dollars and the pounds would sit still long enough for the truth to catch up. In my blue house, with Rory breathing in his crib and the city of New York holding steady outside, I wrote one word. Go. And press send. At 5:12 a.m., the sky over Boston, America was the color of tin, and the street outside Dad's red brick townhouse held its breath. The first police air car drifted into place above the marble steps, quiet as a held note. For others took their stations like patient birds, blue lamps pulsing. On the sidewalk, Officer Daniel Ruiz checked a clipboard, then nodded to the lead attorney. The papers were thick and tidy. Injunctions, subpoenas, a temporary asset freeze that traced every dollar and every pound we had mapped. I watched through a live feed on my phone from my small blue house in New York, my son asleep, my hand flat on the kitchen table, as if to keep the world steady. When the bell rang, the townhouse lights blinked awake room by room, the way a body returns to itself after a long dream. Richard, he is Dad to me, but he would not wear that name today. Opened the door in a gray sweater, tie thrown over his shoulder like an afterthought. Oliver, the accountant, hovered behind him, hair standing up as if shocked by the air. The lawyers stepped forward. Maria's coat swung like a dark sail. Her voice was calm. "Good morning, Richard. Service." She placed the bundle in his hands, then another in Oliver's. Officer Ruiz spoke in simple words about the freeze and the receipts they needed signed. In the doorway, the house looked surprised, as if no one had told it that the truth was coming to sit in its front room. My phone vibrated. The screen read Richard. I answered, and his voice arrived full of storm. "What did you do?" he shouted, as if the question could push back the morning. I looked at the feed. A lawyer pointing to a line about $150,500 slid into a safe lane in Q4, £38,000 returned from London marked as wine, the earlier $72,000 and $48,500 that began the thread. "I protected Emily," I said. "I protected Rory. I protected money that never learned to read the names on the accounts it sat in." He told me I had embarrassed him in his own house. "No," I said, "you did that when you moved the money and called it care." Inside the townhouse, the foyer table had been cleared of holiday garlands to make room for signatures. Oliver tried a smile, the kind that sells weather as a plan, and said something about liquidity events and optics. Maria did not look up. She tapped the page where the freeze order named each account and said, "Initial here, here, and here." Hannah called in from Washington to confirm that the notices had landed at the Gray Tower in New York and at the trust office in Delaware. "Everything parked," she said. Her voice made a straight line in the air. A moment later, Priya texted from London, Europe, cool and orderly, confirming a hold on the £38,000 pending the court's first hearing. I set my phone down and walked to Rory's crib. His fist was tucked under his lip, his breath little waves on the shore of morning. I told him softly that the grown-ups were doing grown-up things, and that I was trying to do them in a way he could one day understand. Back in the kitchen, I counted the cash in my wallet, $1.84, still $84, as if to remind myself that numbers at their smallest are honest. Then I opened the binder where I had taped the printouts, each page a stepping stone over a river that had been rushing under our feet for months. The binder felt heavy. The weight felt right. At the townhouse, Officer Ruiz finished his notes. He asked Richard if there were any questions. Dad stared at the papers like they were a language he used to speak. "This will all be cleared up," he said, voice too loud for the hall. "We'll go to New York and fix it." Maria met his eyes. "You'll go to New York, yes," she said, "but not to fix it. To explain it." Behind them, the house's high mirror caught their faces and gave them back older by an hour. When the air cars lifted, the blue cones faded from the steps, and the street took a breath again. The lawyers left in pairs, coats closing against the cold. Oliver shut the door with an unsteady hand. My phone buzzed with receipts. Service complete. Freeze confirmed. Return acknowledged. I made coffee and stood at the window of my small blue house, watching America wake up. Dog walkers in big scarves, a delivery truck stacked with bread, a girl in a red hat running for the corner bus like joy had a timetable. I texted Emily a single line, "You have space now," and she sent back a heart, then another, then a photo of a sunrise over Chicago like a cut peach. I know people think the drama lives in the air cars and the shouting. But the true knock at dawn is a quieter thing, a paper set on a table with the right names in the right order, a father's voice breaking against the simple shore of a daughter's no, a house that will have to learn new echoes. By noon, the storm had become paperwork, and paperwork had become a path. I chose it, I walked it, and I did not look back. The first hearing was set for a gray Tuesday in New York, America, the kind of day that makes the courthouse look like a careful machine. I wore a plain black dress and carried a thin folder that felt heavier than it looked. Maria met me on the steps with coffee and a nod. Inside, the judge spoke in clean lines, the way I like money to speak. Either this happened or it did not. Either these dollars and pounds belong here or they do not. Richard, my father, sat 2 rows ahead in a new suit that still had the shop's quiet on it. Oliver kept looking at the ceiling as if there were notes written up there for him. Hannah watched the screens from Washington, and Priya dialed in from London in Europe, steady as a metronome ticking time. We did not need thunder. We had papers. The transfers were simple stones laid across a stream. $48,500 marked consulting, $72,000 with the same label, $150,500 parked in a safe lane, and 38,000 pounds that took a thin trip from London and back to America dressed up as vintage wine. The judge looked at each date the way a teacher looks at a line of sums. When Maria finished, the room felt like a table that had just been wiped clean. Richard's lawyer tried to call it family strategy, but the word family could not carry that weight. The freeze held. The clerk stamped the orders with a sound like a door closing softly, and I felt something open inside my chest that had been locked since summer. A week later, we were back for decisions. The judge spoke of restitution and clarity, 2 words I want on my front door. The accounts would return what they had borrowed from the truth. $270,500 moved to the right places, and £38,000 held until the last dotted line was sure. A new trust would be set up for Rory's education. Emily's settlement would be made whole. A donation would be sent in our mother's name to a clinic in Chicago, the one with the blue waiting room and the warm nurses who once knew our family. The judge asked if there were questions. For the first time in months, I did not have one. After court, Emily and I ate soup at a small place near the river. She wore a gentle coat and a look I had not seen since we were girls in our first little house, before the years grew sharp. "I found an apartment in Seattle," she said, showing me a photo of tall windows catching a square of sun. "It is small, but it is mine." I told her small and mine are 2 of the best words in America. She laughed and touched my hand. We spoke of boxes and new coffee shops and a rug that would make the room feel brave. When she left for the airport, she hugged me like a sister does when breath is easier and the road ahead is her own. Back on Maple Street in New York, my blue house greeted me with its soft, honest noises. I wiped the kitchen counter, folded laundry, and checked the new account for Rory's fund. The numbers sat there like good chairs, $25,000 to start, with room to grow. I taped a copy of the order inside the pantry door, next to the recipe for chocolate cake. I want the future to see both things, sweetness and a line that held. That night, I walked Rory around the living room while lights from the street made slow squares on the wall. He touched my necklace and laughed the way babies laugh when they catch the sound of themselves. I counted the cash in my wallet, $1.84, still $84, and felt rich anyway. Richard called once more, late, the way men call when the house is quiet and their thoughts are loud. He did not shout. He said my name like a question. I listened. He spoke of pride and of mistakes that start out small and learn to run. He said he never meant to harm the people he loved. I told him I believed that, and that belief does not fix a ledger. The law had sorted the money. Time would have to sort the rest. We agreed to meet in Boston for coffee next month, in a place with windows and no corners for secrets to hide. When the final checks cleared, Maria sent a short message. All done. Hannah added. Audit trail sealed. Priya wrote. Funds restored. I turned off my phone and opened the window. America in late winter smells like cold iron and bread. Across the street, a neighbor's dog tugged a man into a clumsy trot, and both of them laughed without words. I thought of our mother, of the clinic in Chicago, of a girl in Seattle rolling a rug out on a clean floor. I thought of a townhouse in Boston learning new echoes, and a daughter in New York who had learned that love can say no and still be love. I put Rory down and stood in the doorway of a small room, listening to the hush that comes after a storm is properly written down. The house held us the way a good promise does. Nothing fancy, just firm. Tomorrow I will buy groceries and pay the gas bill and add $50 to the college fund. Tomorrow is not a headline. It is a list that I can carry in my pocket. I like it that way.